Governments are constantly formulating policies under conditions of uncertainty about how the future might evolve and affect policy performance. Under such uncertainty, designing some policies as experiments offers a promising tool for governments to test new and alternative policy designs and learn from them before these are launched fully. While this is well acknowledged in theory, there are several challenges in realizing a policy experiment's potential to do so in practice. A pilot can be considered as an advanced form of policy experimentation to assess not only whether new policy designs will work, but more importantly, how they will work. Studying design features of policy pilots and their outcomes forms the focus of my new book with Cambridge University Press, which is titled Rethinking Policy Piloting: Insights from Indian Agriculture. A widely studied outcome of a pilot and an indicator of its success is in terms of whether the pilot has expanded geographically and extended to reach more beneficiaries without probing into the range of types and forms of pilots that can survive between these extremes and still contribute to improved policy designs. A deeper understanding of the design of policy pilots and their outcomes in terms of how they translate into routine policy making is needed. The key question under investigation in this book is, how do design features of pilots influence their policy translation? In general, I find that the terms experiments and pilots are not bound by watertight classifications. A proper sequencing is also not apparent in practice in viewing pilots and experiments as two separate policy forms, such as experiment only, piloting directly without an experiment leading into a pilot, etc. One could even argue that pilots are nothing but mini policies in themselves. However, compared to routine policies, pilots reflect more ambiguity and conflict around their conception and implementation. Taking a case based approach, I studied 13 policy pilots that were launched by the Central Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Government of India, to address diverse risks and uncertainties in agriculture production in the country. These pilots were selected in a period of 25 years, starting from 1990, the decade that saw liberalization and decentralization reforms in the country, also with implications on the agriculture sector. These pilots were time bound and operated over limited geographical scales with the intention of influencing national agricultural policies in India. In general, they aimed at objectives such as increasing crop productivity and reducing risks to agricultural production, following a period of demonstration and evaluation, and involved schemes around watershed development, and launching a package of technological interventions, crop specific practices, and crop insurance schemes, among others, all testing some policy elements with the intention of guiding national agricultural policy in India. Now, what made Indian agriculture an interesting context to study piloting in? Nearly two-thirds of India's agricultural land is rain-fed, and the productivity from rain-fed areas is further affected by declining soil fertility, fragmentation of agricultural land holdings, and climate change, among other challenges. With small and marginal farmers making up a sizable fraction of the total cultivators in India, the role of the government in supporting them is substantial. While there are variations in priority areas of state governments for agricultural development in their respective states, nationwide programs, including pilots, are needed to give a boost to agriculture, common issues that are faced by agriculture throughout the vast expanse of the country, even though agriculture is a state subject in India. The data in this book is drawn from consultations and interviews with national and state government officials in key agrarian states, researchers from key agricultural research institutes in India, and also international donor agencies who were involved in the design, implementation, or evaluation of the pilots, and also an analysis of key policy documents related to these pilots. Drawing from the literature on policy experimentation, scaling up, and policy change, certain conditions are found to influence a pilot's outcome in terms of their policy translation, and a model is proposed to study these pilots. Detailed case narratives are presented, and a comparative analysis on selected design features of these pilots is conducted to identify configurations of factors that are found to be associated with outcomes of low policy translation of a pilot in terms of in cases where the pilots either terminated or never moved beyond its original scope, or cases of high policy translation where the pilot expanded beyond its original scope and is potentially even institutionalized into routine policies. I must emphasize that this book does not intend to evaluate these pilots and their effectiveness. Rather, it seems to derive logic from otherwise sporadically occurring pilot initiatives in terms of their initiation, development, and outcomes, seeking signals to questions such as why are some pilots picked up while others are let go of? Why do some seemingly futile pilots continue? Why are business as usual programs sometimes launched as pilots while they do not seem to be breaking any new ground? When and how does government engage with non governmental partners, and what role do these partnerships play in governing a pilot's outcome? As we navigate the age of technological disruption in the 21st century, Indian agriculture is also undergoing rapid shifts that call for a rethinking of policy piloting while considering lessons learned from decades of policy piloting. The conversation that this book hopes to start is around experimentation and piloting to be a more conscious activity that forms a regular feature of policy making without the apprehension that the word experiment or pilot evokes. The discussion in this book also questions whether researchers need to recalibrate our enthusiasm around pilots, as these may often lead to only marginal changes to routine policies and not radical changes. The book is also one of the few on comparative analysis of policy pilots, studying their design features, and adds empirical evidence to the scanty literature from Asia on policy experimentation and piloting. The book is targeted at policy researchers and students at master's and doctoral levels interested in studying policy experimentation and in the Indian agriculture context specifically. But in general, the theoretical insights from this research can be extended and adapted to a wide range of social and environmental policy areas and sectors within and outside India that face high uncertainty in the future policy context, such as climate change adaptation, energy security, water resource management, and healthcare policy, among others. Researchers and students would find the following insights useful for related research. What are the forms of integration of pilots, policy integration of pilots? How can design features of pilots be conceptualized and operationalized to study? Is there a mismatch that exists between experimentation and piloting the way we understand it in theory versus policy practice? Some of this discussion may also find equal resonance with both governmental and non governmental agencies who are involved in the design and implementation of policy pilots. Specifically, insights such as how can pilots be used as a tool for risk management? What are some key design features of policy pilots in the agriculture sector? How do pilots integrate into policy, and what are the opportunities and challenges of conducting piloting in a federal government structure? I would like to close with a line of appreciation for the editorial team at Cambridge University Press India for an excellent experience, not only in terms of editing the book, but also the intellectual freedom offered to the author. Thank you.